So take a few moments to renew your bodhicitta motivation that you developed earlier today, and really try to make sure that you're sitting here attending this class for the benefit of all sentient beings. Let's do a little bit of meditation on emptiness, since we're looking at the Prasangika school, and they say that all phenomena, whatever exists, is empty of inherent existence and is merely labeled. The way that it does exist is that it's merely labeled by the mind. So one of the meanings of that is that when we try to find an object, we try to point to something that is an object, like a body or a car or a Buddha or whatever object we choose, we are not able to find something we can point to, we can put our finger on and say, that is the object right there. But that's not how we see things. The way we see things, the way things appear to us, it seems as if we would be able to find things if we look for them. We would be able to point to something. They do exist over there, objectively, from their own side. So let's just analyze that with regard to our body, because that's also something we're looking at in the Wednesday night class on the 37 harmonies, looking at the mindfulness of the body. Our sort of gut level instinctive feeling is that a body is something that's really, really there. There's a real body, whether it's somebody else's body or our own body. It seems to exist objectively from its own side, undeniably there. But if our body did exist that way, we should be able to point to it, point to something. We can say that is the body. But as we've been looking at in the Wednesday night class, our body is composed of many, many, many parts. Skin, blood, organs. So just take a few moments and see if there is some part of the body, among all of these different parts, some part that you can point to and say that is the body. So these are just some ideas we can use to investigate our notions or our gut level feelings about things being real, inherently existing, objectively existing from their own side. The more we examine that kind of idea, the more it kind of falls apart. Seems less real as it appears. But that doesn't mean the body doesn't exist. We do have a body, there are bodies, but what a body is just merely labeled. Body is just labeled in relation to a whole collection of parts, combination of parts, none of which is itself a body. So that's the meaning of being merely labeled. We just have a little bit left of the text that we've been going through, the text on the Tenets systems by Jetsun Choki Gyaltsen. So we've been on the last of the tenet system, Prasangika, and there's just this last point about presentation of grounds and paths. So we'll finish that and then see if there's any time for questions, final questions. Okay, so presentation of grounds and paths. So this is an explanation of how practitioners who wish to attain either nirvana or Buddhahood, how they progress on the path, how do they actually achieve their goals. And it has two parts. The first is objects of abandonment. So what are the things that need to be abandoned, eliminated, cleared out of the way for one to attain one's goal? So the first point says, so basically there are these two types of obscurations. First is called afflictive obscurations. So according to this school, Prasangika, what's included in afflictive obscurations. So these are the obscurations that prevent nirvana. So if we want to attain nirvana, we want to get out of samsara, not have to be born in samsara anymore. These are the things we have to get rid of. So they include coarse and subtle self-graspings and their seeds. So does anyone remember what is a coarse self-grasping?
The absence of or grasping at the self-sufficient, substantially existent person.
Right. So, the conception, grasping the existence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. That's coarse self-grasping. And then subtle self-grasping.
Grasping at an inherently existing self.
Yes, grasping at an inherently existing self. Is that all?
Phenomena.
And other phenomena, yeah. So not just persons, oneself and other persons, but all phenomena. So we have this conception that everything, whatever exists, oneself, others, all other phenomena in samsara, all phenomena beyond samsara, whatever exists, we conceive of them as being inherently existing or truly existing. So that's subtle self-grasping. So those are different types of ignorance. Both the coarse and the subtle self-graspings are different forms of ignorance. And then they have seeds. So so I wanted to mention, so the different kinds of self-graspings as well as the different kinds of afflictions have both innate forms. There's forms of them that arise innately, meaning they've been in our mind for beginningless time. We didn't have to learn them from anybody. They're just inborn. So even animals and insects and newborn babies have those kinds of afflictions. And then there's also acquired forms. So acquired forms are based on learning. I mean, usually they say learning wrong tenets, wrong philosophies. Like you study a tenet system that tells you you have a permanent, unitary, independent soul or self, and you believe that. So that would be a acquired ignorance, acquired misconception, something you just learned from others, but it isn't innate. And And then of other kinds of afflictions that are also acquired. It's not so clearly explained in the teachings what they include. They could include afflictions like anger or attachment that are connected with those kinds of misconceptions. Like if you really believe there's a permanent, unitary, independent self or soul, and then you're very attached to that view, or any other kind of attachment that might arise on the basis of that view. That would be an acquired attachment. And then anger could arise as well. If you're angry at those who don't believe in that kind of view and may disparage that kind of view and tell you, you're an idiot for believing that, or something like that, you get angry. So those would be examples of afflictions that are also acquired. But the way it's explained in Samsara, Nirvana, Buddha, Nature, I think it's in that book, yeah, that it can also include other, not just, those kind of philosophical ideas, but things that we learn, like the country that we're brought up in, the society we're brought up in, the family we're brought up in. We learn certain ideas, and we believe in those, and they could be completely wrong, completely mistaken. And so believing in wrong ideas that we've learned from our family and our country and so on, as well as attachments and aversions, anger that arise based on those kind of views. So that's kind of a broader way of looking at acquired afflictions. And there was some time ago in the Samsara, Nirvana, Buddha, Nature class, there was a discussion about what happens to the acquired afflictions when we die. Do you remember that? Some people remember. and so yeah, it didn't seem to be a conclusion to that. Whether they leave seeds on the mind or not. I think Venerable said they when we die, they strengthen our innate afflictions, but it wasn't clear whether they leave seeds or not. So I remembered when I was studying in the Ornament for Clear Realization, that, in fact, I went back and looked it up in the transcript, and I found that our teacher told us that they do leave seeds. And he gave the example of, let's say there's a person and they follow another, a non-Buddhist school, and they learn that they have a permanent, unitary, independent self, and they believe in that. So during that lifetime, they have a manifest form of that particular misconception. And so that would be an example of an acquired affliction, acquired ignorance, believing in a permanent, unitary, independent self. And then he says, and then if this person dies, and then maybe in their next life they're born as a dog. So as a dog, they would no longer have that kind of conception in their mind in a manifest way, but they could still have the seed of it. The seed of that conception would still be there in the mind. And so, yeah, it does seem that seeds of acquired afflictions do remain in the mind and go from life to life. And I also wrote to, there's a monk I know studying in Sera Monastery. He's almost finished with his Geshe studies, Tenzin Gache. I asked him about this, and he said, yeah, all the Buddhist schools agree that acquired afflictions leave seeds in the mind that can be carried from life to life. And he said, we can actually kind of see that in the way that people are attracted to certain views, right? Some people just have this instinctive attraction to believing in God, for example, or believing in a soul. And so that's probably because they had that kind of belief in previous lives. They held on to it very strongly. It left seeds in their mind. And then again, in this lifetime, they encounter teachings that nourish those seeds. So they they can sprout. So to me, that makes sense, that there are seeds of acquired afflictions, ignorance, and other kinds of afflictions that can go from life to life. So I had wanted to share that with you, and I thought this was a good moment to do that. But they're still not innate, because innate are there from beginningless time and don't depend on education, learning. So acquired can still be there life after life, at least in seed form, but they aren't there from beginningless time, and they depend on education. I guess that's how they differ. Honorable Pema?
I have been wondering, the cause of the second truth, the cause of dukkha is karma and afflictions. So where do we abandon the karma?
There were some things about that in the Samsara Nirvana Buddha nature that we went through recently. Karma, I mean, when you become an Arya, when you attain the direct realization of emptiness, you're an Arya. From that time on, you no longer create any throwing karma that can cause a rebirth, right? Remember that? So from that time on, you're not creating any new karma to take rebirth in samsara, but you still have karma that was created before. It doesn't all just go away. So it's still there in the mind. And in the case of like a bodhisattva Arya, they continue to take birth in samsara, not due to karma and afflictions. They're not under the control of karma and afflictions, but they have the ability to choose their rebirth through the power of prayer. What is it? Compassion and prayer. So out of compassion, they want to be born in samsara to help sentient beings, and they can pray to be born in different places. So through compassion and prayer, they take rebirth in samsara until Buddhahood. You know? And then the hearers and solitary realizers, from the time they become Aryas, they're, from the path of seeing on, they no longer create new throwing karma, but they still have old throwing karma, and they still have craving for a while until they reach a much higher level. And so they continue to take birth in samsara, but they wouldn't be born in the lower realms. They would always be born either in the human realm or in the deva realms, and they do. So many of them continue to take rebirth in the upper realms as they are continuing to meditate and work their way up to their goal of nirvana. So they still have karma, and they still take rebirth due to karma until they become arhats. And then once they're an arhat, they don't have to take rebirth anymore. But they say an arhat still has karmic seeds in their mind. Yeah, they still have the karma created in the past, but it can no longer ripen. It can no longer cause them to take rebirth because they have no more craving. Craving is the eighth link. So craving and grasping, 8th and 9th links, are necessary in order for karma to ripen and produce rebirth. They'd have no more craving and no more grasping. And so even though they have karmic seeds in their mind, those seeds will never ripen and cause them to take rebirth.
So the seed kind of becomes sterile and
I mean, I don't know what happens to them. They can't function. Wasn't there something also like with the meditation on emptiness? The more you meditate on emptiness, you can eliminate the seeds of karma. You can gradually eliminate those. So I suppose it depends on the individual person and how much meditation they do on emptiness, and how much they've cleared up their karma.
And even though they don't have the propelling karma for rebirth, but they still have the karma can still manifest in terms of the environment they have, and like they talk about the arhats behaving like very strange way because of that.
That was with the latencies, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's explained as because of the latencies of ignorance. Latencies they're not karmic seeds. They're the remnants of the afflictions that leave sort of trace in the mind. But I don't think that's due to karma.
Like, is it Mogliana who was beaten up?
Beaten up.
That's a ripening of karma.
Yeah. So they can still have not karmic rebirth, not a rebirth due to karma, but they could still have other kinds of experiences like that example, getting beat up. Or killed as well.
Yeah.
He was actually killed.
Yeah.
But he didn't suffer. He didn't have any mental suffering, even though his body was all beaten up, but there was no mental suffering, because mental suffering, they're beyond mental suffering. So they could still have, physical bad things happen to them, but no more mental suffering. Yeah, karma is quite complicated.
So you're saying the meditation on emptiness is the one that purifies these?
I think I remember that. I can't remember. Does anyone else remember? It was in the Samsara Nirvana Buddha Nature. It came up in one of the discussions about meditation on emptiness, clearing away the old karmic seeds. I could be wrong, but that's just there in my mind. But I'd have to look it up. And then a Buddha, I think in the case of a Buddha has no more karma. I don't think they would have any more karmic seeds. And of course, not creating any new karma.
Is this negative karma? Because wouldn't they still be creating virtuous karma by
They use it.
actions?
But they use a different term. Okay. They call it trinle in Tibetan, which sometimes is translated as enlightened activities. Yeah. So they don't use the word karma. The word karma is just used for non-Buddhas. But in the case of Buddhas, the actions of a Buddha, they don't use the word karma. They call it something else.
So in Samsara Nirvana Buddha Nature, it says purification by means of the wisdom directly realizing emptiness, which begins with the path of seeing as the most powerful purification. It thoroughly destroys those seeds of non-virtue. And then Vaibhashikas and Sautrantika say it is not possible to purify seeds of destructive karma completely. Some result must be experienced. And as proof, they recount Moggallana's tragic death.
Yeah, so that's talking about purifying non-virtuous karma, but even virtuous, like contaminated virtuous karma, is still something that can cause rebirth in samsara. So, one would want to be free of that as well, as long as one is still in samsara. But when you become an arhat, you don't need to worry anymore. You're free. Anyway, let's finish. I want to be able to finish today, so we can. Let's leave time at the end. Okay, so then, so afflictive obscurations includes coarse and subtle self-graspings and their seeds. And plus the afflictions including attachment, aversion, jealousy, pride, and so on, all the various kinds of afflictions, and their seeds. There's also seeds of afflictions that arise due to the force of self-grasping. So again, there's like coarse self-grasping and subtle self-grasping, right? Two kinds of self-graspings. And both of those two forms of self-grasping can lead to afflictions. So there's afflictions that arise from both of those two types of self-grasping. And in Prasangika, these are called coarse afflictions and subtle afflictions. So that's something that came up also in Samsara, Nirvana, Buddha, Nature, on page 126, if you want to review that. So it seems to be only Prasangika that talks about coarse afflictions and subtle afflictions. So I'll just read what it says in Samsara, Nirvana, Buddha, Nature. For Prasangika, grasping a self-sufficient, substantially existent person is a coarse affliction, as are the anger, attachment, and other afflictions based on that grasping. So that's a more coarse level of afflictions. Whereas the ignorance grasping inherent existence, as well as the afflictions based on that, are subtle afflictions. So we also have anger, attachment, and so on, based on grasping inherently existing persons, inherently existing phenomena, and so on. So we have these two levels of afflictions, coarse and subtle. And all of those are included in afflictive obscurations. Yeah. They all need to be eliminated, cleared away to attain nirvana. And then the seeds, so just to review, you've learned this before, but the difference between seeds and latencies, it's kind of complicated because there's these two terms, seeds and latencies. So latencies is like the bigger category. It's like the larger category. And within latencies, there are seeds. So seeds are actually a subcategory, a subgroup of latencies. They are a type of latencies. But then there's also latencies that are not seeds. So not all latencies are seeds. So I like to think of it like, let's say the group fruit, the category of fruit, that's like the big category. And then within fruit, there's apples. So apples are definitely fruit, but not all fruit is apples. It's a bit like, huh?
Three possibility.
Yeah. So so latencies are like fruit, and then seeds are like apples. They're like a subgroup of latencies. And the difference between them is a seed, talking about seeds of afflictions, a seed of an affliction has the power to give rise to another experience of that type of affliction. So a seed of anger in the mind has the power to become anger, an experience of anger in our mind. Whereas a latency, we're going to talk about latencies in next under obscurations to omniscience, that doesn't have that power. A latency that's not a seed, a non-seed latency. A latency doesn't have the power to cause an actual experience of an affliction, like anger, attachment. But it has other functions, which we'll look at. So it is helpful to understand the difference between seeds and latencies.
So all seeds are latencies.
Huh?
All seeds are latencies.
Seeds are latencies.
All seeds are latencies.
Yeah, they are latencies, but latencies are not necessarily seeds. That's how they're explained.
So seeds are having ceased, but latencies are not having ceased.
We're not talking here about
that's
having
not the same
ceased.
thing.
I
Okay.
don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I'm still not clear about having ceased. So please don't ask me that.
Okay.
I've been reading volume 9, checking volume 9, and there's There's a section in there about having ceased. It's very helpful, very good explanation, but it's still like my mind just kind of goes like jello when it comes to that topic.
And here, when you're talking about latencies, are you using that for bakshak?
Paksha, yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes it's translated as imprint. I think there are different terms. There's another one, nupa, potency.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure about the difference between bakchak and nupa, but yeah, latency I think is bakchak, or also translated as imprint. Yeah. Okay, so just to be clear, afflictive obscurations includes all afflictions, both coarse ones and subtle ones, and it also includes the seeds of afflictions, which are left in the mind after we get angry. Then a seed of anger is left there in the mind that has the power to give rise to another experience of anger. So we sure want to get rid of those. So all of those have to be eliminated in order to attain nirvana. So this is one big difference between Prasangika and the other schools. Because for the other schools, even Svatantrika Madhyamika, they say that they do talk about the conception of true existence, not inherent existence, but they say the conception of true existence, but that is not an afflictive obscuration. That is not something that has to be eliminated to attain nirvana. It only has to be eliminated to attain Buddhahood. So if you're a bodhisattva, you want to become a Buddha, you have to eliminate the conception of true existence, grasping true existence. But for hearers and solitary realizers who want to attain nirvana, not Buddhahood, all they have to eliminate is the grasping at a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, and the afflictions that are based on that, attachment and so on. So Prasangika is unique in saying that, nope, that's not enough. And in fact, this is quite important, because according to Prasangika, if somebody, so the other schools say, if you want to become an arhat, you want to get out of nirvana, you just have to meditate on, you want to get out of samsara and attain nirvana, you just have to meditate on the emptiness of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. And once you realize that, and you get rid of that grasping and all the afflictions related to that, you're free. You're an arhat. You're out of samsara. But that is not true. And so in Chandrakirti, in his text called Clear Words, he quotes, there's a sutra called Sutra on the Miserliness of One in France. And in this sutra, Guru Shakyamuni Buddha is talking to Manjushri and telling Manjushri that, I'll just summarize it. He's saying, those who still see like the Four Noble Truths, samsara, nirvana, they still see things as truly existing or inherently existing, then and even if they meditate on the Four Noble Truths and they think they have attained true cessations and true paths and attained the state of arhat, but they're still thinking of things as truly existing or inherently existing. But in fact, what all they're doing is temporarily suppressing their manifest afflictions. They're not eliminating their afflictions. They're not completely abandoning their afflictions. They're just suppressing them. And they may think they've become an arhat and attained nirvana, but then when they come to the end of their life, they die, at the time of death, craving might arise. And then they have doubt and think, oh, Buddha said, there's nirvana and no more rebirth, but I thought I've attained that. Here I see myself going to another rebirth. And then they may develop wrong views, negative views towards the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. They may end up even going to a unfortunate rebirth. Not everybody has that, but some have that. And so there's a big danger in having that misunderstanding, that wrong idea about what you need to do to get out of samsara. So then the Buddha went on to explain in this sutra the correct way to understand the Four Noble Truths, to be free of samsara. You have to meditate on the Four Noble Truths, understanding that they are empty of inherent existence. So they actually talk about two ways of meditating on the Four Noble Truths. I think that comes up in Samsara, Nirvana, Buddha, Nature as well. A gross way of meditating on the Four Noble Truths, where you think of them as being based on this conception of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, and how that gives rise to afflictions and karma and suffering and so on and so forth. That's like a coarse way, a gross way of talking about the Four Noble Truths. But then the subtle way of meditating on the Four Noble Truths is where you think of grasping it to existence or inherent existence as being the root cause of samsara, the root cause of suffering, the thing that keeps us in samsara and all the afflictions arising from that. So that's the subtle way of meditating on the Four Noble Truths. Does that make sense? Probably heard that before. So anyway, according to the Prasangika, it's very important to understand what really is the root of samsara. What is it that keeps us stuck in samsara? And that is the ignorance grasping at true existence or inherent existence, as they explain it. And that's the thing that needs to be overcome, plus all the other afflictions based on that, if we want to be free of samsara. And those of us who want to attain enlightenment also have to do that. So this is one of the unique explanations of Prasangika. Is that clear? And then the second type of obscurations are obscurations to omniscience, also known as cognitive obscurations. So what's included there are the latencies, pakchak, the imprints of grasping to true existence, so the ignorance grasping things as truly existing or inherently existing. So even after that has been eliminated or abandoned, that ignorance, but the latencies are still there. They say it's like the smell of the garlic, even after you've taken the garlic away, the smell lingers for a while. And so, latencies are, both seeds and latencies are abstract composites. So they're not form, they're not consciousness, they're that third type of impermanent phenomena. So those remain in the mind even after grasping at true existence has been eliminated and all the other afflictions have been eliminated. And the latencies cause the appearance of things as truly existing. So that's why even after eliminating ignorance, when you're not in meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness, you're walking around in daily life, things you see appear truly existing. Even though you've realized they don't exist that way, but they still appear that way. So that appearance happens because of the latencies of grasping to true existence. And there's also latencies of the other afflictions, greed, hatred, ignorance. And then it says, all factors of mistaken dualistic appearance that arise due to the power of these latencies. Those those are also included in obscurations to omniscience. And then there was another one that was mentioned in samsara, nirvana, Buddha nature, the defilement that prevents the mind from seeing the two truths simultaneously. So that's also a type of obscuration to omniscience. So how to get rid of those? How can we abandon the obscurations to omniscience? Yeah, bodhicitta isn't really the antidote, but the antidote is the wisdom realizing emptiness, the wisdom directly realizing emptiness. But bodhicitta empowers that wisdom, gives it the strength to be able to eliminate the obscurations to omniscience, which is why bodhisattvas are able to eliminate the obscurations to omniscience, but the hearers and solitary realizers are not able to do that because they don't have bodhicitta and the vast merit that bodhisattvas accumulate on their path, practicing the 6 perfections. Okay, so then according to Prasangika, just to make it clear, afflictive obscurations are consciousnesses, like ignorance and so on, and they're seeds of afflictions, whereas obscurations to omniscience or cognitive obscurations are not consciousness. They're never consciousness. Because according to Svatantrika, the grasping at true existence, that ignorance grasping to existence, that's a consciousness, and that is an obscuration to omniscience.
So the seed of the afflictions are consciousnesses?
No. No, I'm just saying afflictive obscurations include, what's included in afflictive obscurations are consciousnesses such as ignorance, greed, hatred, and so on, and the seeds of those afflictions, which are not consciousness. They are abstract composites. But when it comes to obscurations to omniscience, none of those are consciousnesses. They are only the latencies, which are abstract composites, the type of impermanent phenomena. Okay, so then so then the actual presentation of grounds and paths. So this is talking about how the hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas traverse their paths. The first point says, followers of all 3 vehicles mainly meditate on subtle selflessness of persons and phenomena. So they all have as their main object of meditation the subtle selflessness, which is the emptiness of inherent existence of persons and phenomena. So they all 3 have to meditate on that in order to eliminate all the afflictions, all the afflictive obscurations. And it says mainly, but because that's the main thing they meditate on, but they also meditate on other things such as impermanence and coarse selflessness. But that's the main object of meditation because that's the thing that will enable them to eliminate the afflictions, the afflictive obscurations. So they all have the same main object of meditation, but, next point, there are differences in their main objects of abandonment. So what they abandon. So hearers and solitary realizers mainly abandon the 2 self-graspings, coarse and subtle self-graspings, and the seeds of those. Again, it says mainly because they also abandon all the other afflictions, attachment, aversion, and so on. So all afflictions are abandoned by hearers and solitary realizers, whereas bodhisattvas mainly abandon the latencies, the obscurations to omniscience. So again, it says mainly because they also have to abandon all the afflictive obscurations. But their main object, the main thing they want to eliminate is latencies, because those are the things that prevent omniscience, Buddhahood, which is their goal. And what enables them to abandon those latencies is bodhicitta and the practice of the six perfections, accumulating that vast amount of merit that empowers their wisdom so that it can eliminate the latencies. Okay, one last slide. So this is something that came up recently in the Samsara Nirvana Buddha Nature class. The terms nirvana with remainder, nirvana without remainder. So Prasangika has a unique way of explaining these terms. So nirvana without, starts with nirvana without remainder, because that's actually what an arhat attains first. And so it refers to suchness. Now the word suchness is another term for emptiness. There's lots of different terms for emptiness. Suchness, reality, sphere of reality. So it's just another of those terms. So it's emptiness, suchness, emptiness, distinguished by the abandonment of the two self-graspings and their seeds in the minds of arhats in meditative equipoise. So you probably remember in the Samsara Nirvana Buddha Nature class that according to Prasangika, nirvana is emptiness, but not just any emptiness, not the emptiness of the table, but the emptiness of a mind, and not just any mind, but a mind that has abandoned at least the afflictive obscurations, like the mind of an arhat. Okay, so you have an arhat, you have the mind of the arhat, and then you have the emptiness of that mind, emptiness of inherent existence of that person's mind. So that's what Prasangika points to as being nirvana, the emptiness of that being's mind. And then, so that's what nirvana is. It's the emptiness of the mind of an arhat. And then nirvana without remainder is the emptiness of that arhat's mind when they are in meditative equipoise. So when they're in meditative equipoise, that means they are single-pointedly focused on emptiness. Does anything else appear at that time? No, only emptiness appears, and so there's no appearance of anything else, including true existence or conventionalities. So there's this term dualistic appearances, which can refer to other kinds of things that appear to the mind besides emptiness. So no dualistic appearances appear to the mind of the arhat when they're in meditative equipoise. So those dualistic appearances are what is referred to by the term remainder. So remainder means remainder of dualistic appearances. So nirvana without remainder is, when there's no dualistic appearances appearing in the mind of this arhat. That makes sense? So it's the emptiness of the arhat's mind when they are in meditative equipoise on emptiness, free of any dualistic appearances. That's the meaning of nirvana without remainder. And then nirvana with remainder is when the arhat is not in meditative equipoise. They're doing other things, and so they're seeing conventional phenomena, their own bodies and people and so on and so forth. And and because they haven't abandoned the obscurations to omniscience, they still have the appearance of true existence. Things still appear truly existing, even though they've realized emptiness. They know things aren't existing truly, but they still appear that way. So there's still the appearance of true existence, and also the appearance of conventionalities. So those are dualistic appearances that are appearing to the mind of the arhat when they're not in meditative equipoise. So that's the meaning of nirvana without remainder. It's the emptiness of the arhat's mind when they're not in meditative equipoise and they have this remainder of dualistic appearances. That makes sense? Do you remember how the other schools explain these terms, nirvana with and without remainder? How do they explain them?
Some referring to the karmic seeds.
The aggregates.
Yeah, the term remainder refers to the aggregates, mainly the body. Mainly it means the body. So what would be nirvana with remainder?
Still having a body.
Right, so when you're an arhat, you become an arhat, but you still have this old body. Which, yeah, anyway, you'll have your ordinary body. So the remainder then refers to, yeah, I don't know if there's any other aggregates that they have that would be included in remainder, but I think it's mainly the body. And then nirvana without remainder is when they die, they separate from this old body. And then what happens to them after that, different schools have different stories. I like the story of being in a lotus, with a body of the nature of mind, a mental body, sitting in the lotus until the Buddha knocks on the petals and wakes them up and says, "Come on, you got more work to do." But anyway, they no longer have that kind of, I guess it would have been a contaminated body. Yeah, it would have been a contaminated body thrown by karma and afflictions. They're finished with that. Yeah, so there's quite a difference in explanation of those terms from the other schools and Prasangika. And as far as I know, these terms, nirvana with remainder, without remainder, that only applies to arhats. Here in solitary realizer arhats, but not Buddhas. They don't use those terms for Buddhas. I don't think so.
Wouldn't they say that the Buddha also has a contaminated body?
The lower schools say that.
Yeah.
But not the Mahayana schools.
But they don't refer to him as having attained nirvana with remainder.
They might, yeah, the Vaibhashikas and the Sautrantikas. So their view is that Shakyamuni Buddha, he was still a bodhisattva. He was an ordinary bodhisattva when he was born as Prince Siddhartha. He wasn't even an Arya bodhisattva. He was an ordinary bodhisattva. And his body was still a contaminated body, the result of karma and afflictions. And then when he sat under the Bodhi tree and meditated, then he went into the path of seeing and went all the way to Buddhahood in one meditation setting. And so even when he became a Buddha, he still had a contaminated body. That's their view. So they would probably use these terms, oh, that was nirvana with remainder, and then when he passed away, that's nirvana without remainder. So they may use those terms for the Buddha, but not the Mahayana schools have a different explanation. I don't think we would use those terms for Buddha. Also, because a Buddha is always in meditative equipoise on emptiness, and at the same time they see conventionalities, but there's no remainder of the appearance of true existence. And to the mind of a Buddha, nothing appears truly existing, inherently existing. And that's the main meaning of remainder. remainder is that kind of appearance of things as truly existing. So that doesn't appear to the mind of a Buddha. Okay, so one last bit. Holders of the Mahayana lineage, who are definite in the lineage from the beginning, abandon afflictive obscurations upon attaining the eighth ground, and abandon obscurations to omniscience upon attaining Buddhahood and the four bodies. So this expression, holders of the Mahayana lineage who are definite in the lineage, that means somebody who enters the Bodhisattva path from the beginning, rather than somebody who was previously a hearer, arhat, or a solitary realizer, arhat, and then entered the Bodhisattva path. So those who are right from the beginning on the Bodhisattva path, so when they abandon the afflictive obscurations, it's actually at the end of the seventh ground. So from the eighth ground on, beginning of the eighth ground on, they have no more afflictive obscurations. And from that time on, they start to abandon the obscurations to omniscience, the cognitive obscurations. And when they've completely abandoned all the cognitive obscurations, that's the point at which they become Buddha and attain the four Buddha bodies. So, do you remember Svatantrika? How does Svatantrika explain the abandoning of the obscurations by a Bodhisattva?
Simultaneous. And
Yeah.
Abandon them the last the abandon the last the afflictive obscurations with the cognitive obscurations upon attaining Buddhahood.
Yeah, that's according to the Yogacara Svatantrika Madhyamika, which is the same school as in the ornament. So according to that school, bodhisattvas abandon both types of obscurations, afflictive obscurations and obscurations to omniscience, at the same time, starting from the path of seeing, starting from the first ground. So they're abandoning both obscurations all the way up to Buddhahood. And it's only when they become Buddhas that they have completely eliminated all the obscurations, both afflictive and cognitive. But the other school, the Sotrantika Svatantrika Madhyamika, has slightly different explanation. They start the same way. The bodhisattva starts abandoning both types of obscurations simultaneously from the path of seeing. But when they reach the eighth ground, they have finished abandoning all the afflictive obscurations. So that's, in that way, they are like Prasangika. But then they still have more obscurations to omniscience to get rid of. So those are abandoned on the last three grounds. And then they become Buddhahood. They become Buddhas. So it's a little different. So then I was wondering, so this is talking about someone who's definite in the Mahayana lineage from the beginning, but what about the arhats? They followed the path, the Hinayana path, hearer's path, or solitary realizer's path, became arhats. And so they abandon all the afflictive obscurations. They're free of those. But then eventually they enter the Mahayana path. And they have to start from the beginning. They have to start with a path of accumulation, generate bodhicitta, attain the path of accumulation, then proceed on the path. So they've already abandoned all the afflictive obscurations. So when do they start abandoning the obscurations to omniscience?
Would it be the same on the eighth round?
I would think so. I couldn't imagine that they would do it faster than the bodhisattvas. But that means they're not actually abandoning anything until they reach the eighth ground. Nothing is being abandoned because they've already abandoned all the afflictive obscurations.
But they do need to accumulate massive amounts of merit.
They have to accumulate a lot of merit. And so my guess is, I'm not sure, 100% sure, but my guess is that probably they also start abandoning obscurations to omniscience when they get to the 8th ground.
But they do say that it's more difficult for them to accumulate merit because they don't have afflictions, and also, I mean, they don't have afflictions, and it's not like to get bodhicitta going. It's
Well, I think because they spent so much time not having bodhicitta and focusing on their own goal of nirvana, that they're just not familiar with thinking about all sentient beings. So it's harder for them to, have that kind of mind. And I've also heard it said, I can't remember where I heard this, but because they had attained that blissful state of nirvana already, they spent quite a bit of time absorbed in that experience before they entered the Mahayana path, that they still sometimes go back into that. It's like a habit that they have to get absorbed in the bliss of nirvana. And so I guess they can, that continues to happen even when they're on the bodhisattva path. They get absorbed in that bliss of nirvana. And then during that time, not really creating much merit for enlightenment.
That was in samsara nirvana Buddha
Hmm?
nature. That was in samsara nirvana Buddha nature. 'Cause
So-
it says it takes them longer than 3 kalas, great eons,
Yeah.
to progress through the 3 paths.
Yeah, so they say it's much better to start from the Mahayana path from the beginning. You'll get there faster. You'll
I
get to
wonder
enlightenment.
if other things that they need to unlearn. Because the example that I've heard given is like the equivalent is they have built a really nice house, but now you need to build a skyscraper for the bodhisattva. So you first have to destroy your house, get the foundation dug up, everything. You have to like undo everything that you've done, lay down the proper foundation for the skyscraper that the bodhisattva need. So that takes a lot more effort. So I don't know, do they have to dismantle things that?
Well, it doesn't sound quite right that they have to dismantle everything, because they have been meditating on emptiness of inherent existence. They've realized that, and that's, a very important part of the bodhisattva's path. So they certainly don't want to dismantle that. But their meditation on emptiness was not imbued with compassion, great compassion and bodhicitta. It was just, focused on their own attainment of nirvana. So, yeah, I don't know. I haven't come across a lot of explanation about what arhats do once they enter the mind.
Because sometimes I think it's like propaganda, they just want to encourage you not to go into the arhat's path, and just this,
Yeah,
so they tell you all these things. That's why I don't know how true they are.
yeah. Yeah, there's things in the sutras, in some of the Mahayana sutras, that are kind of, I guess, quite disparaging of that path. But it could be because that was more known in India at the time. It was more publicly known, and more people knew about it and had great devotion to it and so on. So I think they were trying to point out, the downside of that particular path, and the upside of the bodhisattva path, to get people interested in that. So yeah, I was never comfortable with the sort of disparaging remarks about hearers and solitary realizers. And I really like the way the Dalai Lama talks about it. He really emphasizes having great respect, great devotion. It was taught by the Buddha. And there are people who are inclined to that. That's their, what's fits best for them, what works best for them. So it wouldn't be right to disparage. But on the other hand, I think it's probably true that it would take longer to get to enlightenment that way. Because some people think, well, you can become an arhat in 3 lifetimes if you follow the hero's path. And then once you're an arhat, then you can enter the Mahayana path and just zoop, But they say, well, it's not quite like that because of this tendency to get absorbed in the bliss of nirvana and be reluctant to emerge from that, to then generate bodhicitta and great compassion and follow the bodhisattva's path.
Would it not matter however long you are because you have no affliction, so there's no suffering, you're not, time
But
doesn't
sentient
quite
beings
matter.
are waiting for you.
But from the arhat's perspective, it is 3, 5 countless great eons, 10 countless great eons. There's no anger, there's no attachment. So what if it's 20 countless great eons?
No, I think they say, yeah, we want, the ideal attitude of a bodhisattva is I want to get to enlightenment as quickly as possible so that I can help sentient beings. They're there in hell, burning in terrible pain and suffering. I don't want to make them wait. So
you have to put others before yourself.
Hmm?
You have to put others' happiness before your own.
Yeah.
You have to practice Mahayana.
Okay, so anyway, that's it. We have finished the text. It's kind of a short text. There's other texts on tenets that are more long and complicated, but it's kind of a nice start. And then with this as a basis, then you can learn other aspects of the 4 schools, which happens anyway, listening to His Holiness and Venerable Children and Jeffrey and so on. So this is like a good basis to go on.